The rest of the chapter is pretty much all about cancer and how we get cancer and what cancer looks like. So you should remember that cancer usually results when the cell cycle is out of control. So that means that the cell divides when it's not supposed to, and it's not stopped. So division just keeps happening and happening, and then you get a tumor. Okay. The idea of what causes cancer, though, there were three terms that we looked at when we did the click and learn last semester. So oncogene was one. An oncogene is a sequence, a gene that causes cancer. So that means it's actively causing cancer. There are also proto-oncogenes, which this is a gene, if it mutates, or if the mutation is activated, it could then cause cancer. So it's like a pre-oncogene, or before you get to the oncogene part, okay? So this figure here talks about proto-oncogenes and how we go from proto-oncogene to an oncogene. So how does it start causing cancer? So any gene or any sequence on the DNA that helps turn on cell division and make it active would be called a proto-oncogene. So if that gets a mutation, and that mutation causes it to be turned on more than it should be, or the protein that it makes is faulty, then that can cause cancer. So that's one way that proto-oncogenes become oncogenes. Another way is if you somehow get multiple copies of the proto-oncogene. So now instead of only one on your DNA sequence, you have 2 or 3 copies. So rather than making only one copy of the protein, you make 2 or 3 copies. And if that happens, then that can cause the cell to divide more than it should. The other type of pathway that gives a proto-oncogene to an oncogene is having a mutation in the regulatory sequence. So remember the promoters? What binds to the promoter? RNA polymerase. Okay, so a promoter is a regulatory sequence. If RNA polymerase binds to it more than it should, so if it mutates so that RNA polymerase can attach more easily, then you have transcription of that gene occur more, so that could lead to cancer. You could also have a mutation of an enhancer sequence or of the regulatory gene that makes the repressor that would lead to transcription happening more than it should. Okay, so that's 3 different pathways to make a proto-oncogene into an oncogene, so causing more cell growth than you need. Yeah?
So like you said, usually it like creates a tumor, but like with skin cancer, you usually get like a spot or something. Like what makes that do that?
Good question, I don't know.
Okay.
We can look into that if you want to, though. It is a good question.
Yeah.
There's a lot that I did not know about cancer. Like most of what I'm teaching you guys, I didn't learn till last year, because I just didn't know it. So there's still a ton of questions.
Right.
That I have, and
my dad has it, and like I'll
okay.
probably get it. I'm always
Okay.
in the sun.
Do you? I would say, do you go out in the sun a lot?
Yeah, so much. I love it.
Okay, which is good and bad. It's good for some things because they tell you if you live in the climate like we have in the Midwest, we don't get sun all the time, and part of actually staying healthy is making vitamin D. Well, being in the sun for like 15 minutes a day helps your body make vitamin D, so that's healthy. But at the same time, we're not supposed to sunbathe. We're not supposed to be in the sun too much. So how do you balance those things? Yeah. Yes,
like
sunscreen is very helpful. Okay. So we had proto-oncogenes, oncogenes, but then there's also tumor suppressor genes or tumor suppressing genes. So this is any sequence of the DNA that helps stop or inhibit cell division. And you can imagine if that gets mutated, as in this example, then the protein doesn't work right, so cell growth is not inhibited. And if it's not stopped, then you have division happening when it's not supposed to happen. Okay, that's one way that a tumor suppressor gene can can lead to cancer. So then, okay, let's say you have a mutation in a proto-oncogene. Is that the end of the world? No. Because you need about 6 mutations before cancer will develop. So this section talks about the idea that it's not just the first mutation that's a problem, and it's not just the first mutation anywhere in your DNA. It does have to be in a specific spot. But the older your cells get, the more mutations they accumulate, so then the more likely as you get older, you are to develop cancer. So that could be one reason why there are some cancers we don't see until people are in their 60s or 70s or 80s. We tend to see cancer in tissues that divide more often at earlier ages. So skin is a good example. Your skin is always dividing and renewing itself. So people can get skin cancer at a younger age than they would get cancer maybe in some other parts of the body. Can you think of another place in the body that's always replacing itself? Okay, we said skin. Stomach. Okay. Hair, potentially, that's kind of skin related because they both come from the scalp. Okay. But the lining on your stomach, the lining in your colon or your small intestine, those are always replaced because as you eat food, if you don't replace it, then you're just damaging those cells. So colon cancer is one of the most common types of cancer as well, because that area of the body is always dividing. Okay. So this is an example of if you change the DNA, this is how the cells change. So if you activate an oncogene, so you go from proto-oncogene to an oncogene, so now it's going to cause the cell to grow more, then that means your cell is dividing more than it should. Okay, so after that happens, then you can get a tumor suppressor gene and have a mutation in that. If the cell's dividing more than it should, you're more likely to have more mutations. Okay, so once a proto-oncogene becomes an oncogene, that helps lead to mutations more quickly. So again, you have to accumulate like 6 different mutations before it develops into a type of cancer. But at that point, it's game over, sort of. Hopefully you're able to treat the cancer. Okay. Next section, this is 1117, and this is looking at 2 different types of signal transduction pathways. So this one is a pathway that is turning on the cell cycle. So this is what the pathway would look like normally. You have the growth factor as the signal, and once it reaches the cell, then the cell turns on a bunch of relay proteins, and it turns on a transcription factor. That transcription factor then expresses the DNA and makes a protein. Okay, this protein would stimulate or turn on cell division. If you have a mutation or a problem, then you can have extra protein made. If there's too much of the protein, then you get cell division occurring too much. Okay, so this looks at or is specifically related to controlling the cell cycle. So with the cell cycle, it's regulated by levels of different proteins. So once the cell builds up enough of a protein, then division is turned on. Okay, so if you are making extra of the protein more than you're supposed to, you're going to turn on cell division early. Okay, this one looks at what if rather than mutating or having a mutation in a thing that stimulates the cell cycle, we have a mutation in something that inhibits the cell cycle. So normal pathway, you have a factor that attaches to the receptor, you turn on some relay proteins, you have a transcription factor that's activated so it performs transcription, and then the protein that's made helps prevent cell division. Okay, that's helpful sometimes. Sometimes the cell's not supposed to divide for a number of reasons. It could be that the DNA was copied the wrong way. It could be that there's too many cells around it, so there's no room for it to divide. But if this is mutated at all, this pathway doesn't work correctly, then rather than making the protein at the end that's supposed to stop cell division, the protein might not be made at all. Okay, so 2 examples of a gene that should stimulate the cell cycle and a gene that should inhibit the cell cycle are the RAS gene, so it's RAS, or the P53 gene. So the RAS gene stimulates the cell cycle, so it is a proto-oncogene that can become an oncogene, and the P53 gene inhibits the cell cycle. Make sense? Coolio? Last section, there's another fancy chart in this one. This one pretty much says the stuff that you choose to do can increase or change, like decrease your risk of cancer. So be smart, people, live wisely. It's kind of what it says. So the reason for that is that we know there are things in the environment or that you can eat and be exposed to that cause cancer. Those would be called carcinogens. Anything that causes mutations is called a mutagen. If it specifically is known to cause cancer, then it's called a carcinogen. Most of the time, mutagens are also carcinogens. If it's causing mutations, it's probably going to cause cancer. So they're really closely linked together. Okay. So some examples of things that are carcinogenic: UV radiation, okay, tobacco, Those are common examples most people know of because there's a big education campaign to, hey, don't go sunbathing, okay, and that's UV radiation that you're exposed to, and don't smoke, that's tobacco, okay. What we're finding, and goes along with some of the epigenetic studies that have been done, and looking at how the body handles the food that you eat, there's a lot of things that can help reduce your risk. So getting enough fiber every day. That can be eating a certain amount of plant fiber. So you're eating like a certain amount of whole grain bread, or you're eating an apple, or you're eating carrots, okay? Getting enough fiber helps reduce your risk of cancer. Lowering how much animal fat you eat can reduce your risk of cancer. So if you eat lean meat, or you don't eat as many products from animals, that helps lower your risk. Getting enough of certain vitamins helps lower your risk. So vitamin C is an example, vitamin E is another example. Vitamin A might also be related to helping reduce cancer risk. So again, be smart people, eat healthy, and then you're usually better off, okay? One of the things that has also helped reduce people's risk of cancer is developing tests that help us detect it earlier. So if you look at this chart, it shows a whole bunch of different risk factors of different things that people can have going on in their life that increases the chance of cancer. And then yellow means that we can't screen for it early. Blue means we can screen for it early. So which types of cancer can we screen for early?
Oral, cervical, breast, prostate, skin. I can't read that.
Colorectal. Okay, so this is something in the colon or the rectum area. So this is like large intestine, okay? What types of cancer can't we screen for early yet?
Liver, say urine.
Uterine.
Uterine.
So that's in the uterus.
Lymphoma, lung.
Lung, okay? So
I can't read it.
if people don't go in for their checkups at certain ages like they're supposed to, like if a woman turns, I forget how old you're supposed to be. I think it might be 50.
50, that's what I thought.
But if you have a history of breast cancer, they usually recommend earlier to get a mammogram, which is a breast
I
exam.
said, yeah.
Yeah, the machine does that,
Yeah.
okay? But if you don't go in for that, that would be an early screening that you're missing. If when you turn 50, you don't go in for a colonoscopy, yeah, fun. But then you miss potentially early screening. Another thing, and I'm going to mention this just because it's interesting to me, so you get to learn about it. There you go. My parents both turned 50 this year, so they had different exams scheduled, okay? But my husband's a nurse, so he was talking about, what?
I said, did he have to do it?
No. Thankfully not. That would be embarrassing, I think. But he was talking about a test that's actually better to screen for cancer than a colonoscopy. But it's a test that insurance companies right now in the US don't usually authorize. So colonoscopies, yes, get one, go for it, and the insurance company will pay for it. But if you want to get this other test done that has a better chance of actually telling if you have cancer, they don't usually authorize it. So it's kind of weird, okay? But that's something that we deal with in a developed country is, yeah, we have healthcare and we have great medical care. Who pays for it? Okay, so you guys hopefully won't have to worry about that for a while. Thanks to some of the laws in place, you can be on your parents' insurance till you're 26, and hopefully your parents let you do that because insurance is crazy. But anyway, insurance paying for stuff, yeah, it's nuts. Okay, so